What's going on, everybody? Today I want to talk about Reformation Day. Reformation Day is the celebration of the reformer Martin Luther and the beginning of the Reformation. But now you may ask, what is the Reformation? Well, grab yourself a cup of coffee, have a seat, and let's talk about some history. Hi, my name is Brandon Foster, and I am a historian primarily focusing on Germanic history. That involves anyone who is from the Germanic peoples, including history of Germany, France, England, and Scandinavia. This goes from the 1st century AD all the way up to the present. Now that is a large scope, and it can include many things. And today is going to include the wonderful history of the Reformation and how it is celebrated today on October 31st, called Reformation Day. So let's get into it. Reformation Day was officially recognized as a holiday many centuries after, 150 years actually, after the Reformation began. So Martin Luther was a reformer, but before he was a reformer, he was actually a Catholic monk. He was born around 1483, and he grew up in a middle-class family in Germany. Saxony, to be exact, is where he was born and kind of grew up. Now, Saxony was part of the Holy Roman Empire at that time. This is about 2 centuries before the fall of the Holy Roman Empire. And, 4 centuries actually, sorry. So 4 centuries before its fall, and he was a very intelligent man. Being from a middle-class family, he was offered an education that many children would not have gotten at that time. His father was in the business of selling copper. He actually moved from his birth town to a different town, where his father also became on the city council and stuff like that. So he was a very respected and well-known family. So the Luther family offered him an education, and he would become very versed in Latin, and later in his life he would learn Greek, Hebrew, he knew German, because he was German. And so he was a very well-learned individual. He went to primary school, and after that he would go to university, and he would get his undergraduate in just general liberal studies. Then he would go to get his master's and go to law. While he was on his way to become a lawyer, which is what his father wanted, he was traveling home, I believe, at one point, and a lightning bolt hit a tree next to him. In fear, he shouted out, "Lord, if you save me, I will become a monk." And clearly, he survived, and he did. He became a monk. Now, many people declare such things and don't actually mean them. But in this case, we think he actually did, because he did dedicate the rest of his life to religious studies and God, though not always for the Catholic Church. While he was a monk, he would continue to increase his learning, and he would go to the school of Wittenberg and Erfurt, I think, if I'm saying that correctly. And he would study Bible and theology instead of being a lawyer. But he did have plenty of law experience because of his previous engagement. He had started some classes. So while he was there, he started learning more and more. He got his undergrad, master's, and doctorate all in the Bible and theology. And he actually started teaching at the University of Wittenberg. He would go back and forth between those two schools, but his primary location was Wittenberg. While there, another man called Johann Tetzel started selling indulgences, and this would be the catalyst to Martin Luther becoming the man that we know him as today. So Johann Tetzel, a different Johann, would go around to different towns in Germany or the Holy Roman Empire and try and sell these things called indulgences. It's not done today and by any means, but back then it was believed that if you purchased an indulgence, that depending on the indulgence when it was in history, you could either remove time off in purgatory, or you could remove yourself entirely from purgatory, going directly from this reality to heaven. Eventually, indulgences started being sold for other people. And the argument was, well, if your soul is safe, is your grandmother's soul safe? And yes, that is kind of a straw man argument of it, so any Catholics watching, please don't get super mad. I'm paraphrasing a very long, heated debate. So, at this point, Tetzel was starting to sell and say, if you bought this indulgence, you were good permanently. And lots of people, being very fearful of their soul, as most humans are, they started paying for them. And in reality, what they were buying and what angered Luther so much outside of the theological aspect of it was that the Pope at that time was trying to build or repair the St. Basilica in Rome. So it was going to a pet project of the Pope. And it bothered Luther, who was slightly a nationalistic individual, that money was coming from the poor peasants of Germany and going to the rich Italians in Rome. And that angered him. And the more he studied Scripture, the more he started realizing that it's nowhere to be found. This isn't a thing in the Bible. There's no such thing as indulgences. And he didn't actually want to break away from the Catholic Church. That was never his intention. His intention was to create a debate. And this was what he did. He wrote 95 points that he wanted to discuss. Primarily, he wanted to discuss them with Johann Tetzel, but he was willing to discuss these things on an academic level with anyone and everyone. He wanted to have an academic debate. Was he on the path to Reformation? That is something that is debated. We're not sure if he was trying to move to Reformation or if he was just trying to clear up some things and maybe correct one or two ideas, small ideas. He was not trying to reform the entire ship. He maybe wanted to fix a rope or two. So he took these 95 theses, and as any good-intentioned German might do at that time, he took that and his glue stick, and he went to the church doors of Wittenberg. Now, the idea of him nailing 95 theses on the door, while it is very movie-esque and cinematographic, it's not historically accurate. He did not nail them to the door. It was the common practice to glue them to the door. You would kind of put them over each other, and maybe they would rip them off and put another one on. I'm not 100% sure. I haven't studied that deep, if we even know. So he glued the 95 theses on the door. He actually sent out a couple more. He sent one out to Tetzel, or to the person, his manager or something, and he wanted to just have a debate. Now, he had his debate, but it was not the way that he thought it was going to be. See, instead, he angered the Pope, and he angered many of the bishops. And to make a very long story short, he was put under multiple different trials, and they tried to kill him at different points. They wanted to burn all of his books, which in fact they did. He had many writings. And they tried to silence him in general. Now, unfortunately for the Pope, fortunately for Martin Luther, this was shortly after the printing press, so Johann Gutenberg, the other Johann, he does come into the story, after his printing press was invented. And this had already been implanted in different parts of Europe, and his writings, Martin Luther's writings, were fire on these presses. People wanted to read them, and everyone was willing to pay. So the printing presses were furious with printing Luther's items. And this spread across all of Europe. And that really impacted how some of these events would go. Because centuries earlier, other people had tried doing the same thing. This was not the first time that a man had tried to reform or speak out on some of the practices of the Catholic Church. But this would be the greatest and one of the last times someone would. Because after Martin Luther, after the debates and the trials and the diets, it would end. The Catholic Church, while still today, would have the largest tear it has ever had in its history. Yes, the Eastern Orthodox did leave centuries before, but the Eastern Orthodox has remained very regional. There are across the globe, but its main focus is still where the Eastern Roman Empire used to be. Catholicism grew because of the Spanish Inquisition and the Spanish move to Latin and South Central America. And while those places are primarily Catholic, the Protestants would tear in Europe and come to North America and many other places in the world. Asia, Africa, North America are primarily more Protestant than they are Catholic. So this is the event, and this is the quick timeline that would lead up to the proclaiming Reformation Day. So 150 years later, 150 years from 1517, when Martin Luther glued his 95 Theses. So we're talking about, 1517, so that's 1670 something, 1667, something like that. This is when the Reformation Day would be declared. Sorry, brain disappeared for a minute. So Reformation Day was declared on that time, and has been celebrated ever since. Lutherans have been celebrating it very regularly, especially German Lutherans. Eventually, it would make its way into the English-speaking world, even though they're both Germanic languages. It took a while to get to us. And after a while, the English Lutherans would practice Reformation Day on October 31st. And then eventually, it has more recently gotten into the non-Lutheran world. So many conservative Christians, Reformed Christians, who are looking for a way to get out of the Halloween world, but they still want to celebrate something because everybody else is celebrating something. And most of their kids want to celebrate Halloween. They're like, well, we don't want to celebrate that. And they have different reasons why they think they should not celebrate that. So they figured out another holiday. They're like, well, Reformation Day has already been around, so let us celebrate that instead. Let's celebrate a time when we can focus on Luther and the contributions he gave to Christendom and the world, instead of this, what they believe to be a unholy pagan holiday. Now, if you're interested in Halloween, you can watch my other video that I made, which is coming out with this one. It is a 2-part series. You can also read about more in depth what I have to talk about both of them. I have written articles on both on my Substack. And thanks for watching. Also, if you enjoy what I have to say, please like, follow, subscribe, share, do all the things. Go watch my other things. I'll have something here, wherever it might be, for you to watch. And again, thanks. Peace.